Welcome to the Love Local Chicagoland podcast. Here we invite people and nonprofits from our local communities to share their stories and their voices. Through amplifying their message, we share their genuine human experiences that connect us all. Our goal is to make our communities more than just a place to live, but instead a place to thrive. Tune in to hear what makes our community so special right here on the Love Local Chicagoland podcast. Hey, what's going on, friends? Welcome back to another episode of the Love Local Chicagoland podcast. I am super excited today because we're rolling out a new series here on Love Local Chicagoland called Real Stories, inspired by the man that I have in front of me, Mr. Brandon Cork. You know him as a person that does sales with Pulse Technology, but he's so much more than that. He is a true man with a heart of gold that has an ability to connect like I've never seen anybody do before, and just such a genuine way of truly wanting to come from a place to be able to help people. Today, we're going to dive into his story. And what's cool about this story is me and him, we grew up like 5 miles apart, maybe. I think that's probably max. And I was in Hessville, Hammond area, and he was in Gary, Indiana. But our perspectives are different. Me growing up as a white kid and him growing up as an African-American. Our journeys have been different. And the things that we had to go through in our lives and the things that we've seen are truly unique to each of our perspectives. So we're looking forward to diving in, but enough of me talking. Let's get into Real Stories with Brandon Cork. Brandon Cork, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you, Jason. That introduction, I'm honored. Thank you much.
It's all true, brother. It's all true. You know, I think I met you probably around 3-4 years ago now, and we hit it off right away. I think finding out like we grew up super close to each other, like right off of 80 Borman Expressway right there. Not too far at all. But getting to know you over these years, I feel super lucky to have known you. You're a good man, a good heart. You do so much good things for the community, whether it's what you do with National Hispanic Suicide Prevention with Gabby and AJ, or whether it's Boys and Girls Club or anything else in between that you do. You come from a place of giving, and you come from a place of kindness that it truly just wants to help people. So I love those types of people. They're my types of people. So I'm excited for this conversation, man. But let's kind of dive in and let's go into kind of give us a overview of who Brandon Cork is.
A lot, but not a much, right? So definitely a community person, family person, spiritual person, definitely a workaholic as well. I'm always in the community. I usually try to do my best at whatever I do. I'm very much about commitment too. If I commit to something, I'm definitely loyal to my friends, loyal to people around me as well. And that's who I am. Sports fanatic, definitely, and supporting where I came from as well. You mentioned Gary, Indiana. So definitely represent that.
90s Bulls, baby. Tell me it was anybody different. I'll tell you you're lying.
So it's funny too, because in Indiana, we were also on the verge. I don't know if you had it too, whether you were going to be a Pacers fan or a Bulls fan, because we were right kind of on the cuffs. But, where we were at, we're closer to Chicago. So a lot of us grew up as Bulls fans during that age. Larry Bird was popular, Reggie Miller, things like that. So it was back and forth, but, definitely go hard for the Bulls.
I would say for me personally, I was a Bulls fan, but I love Reggie Miller.
Oh, yes.
Like I remember being outside, like shooting the three, pretending like I could shoot the threes. Let's be real. But, it was just that era, 80s, 90s kids growing up in Northwest Indiana. Like most of us, I feel like we're Chicago fans, and then you had some Colt fans, you had some Colt fans, you had some Pacer fans, those types of things. But rock and roll, man. So you grew up, you kind of mentioned it, you grew up in Gary, Indiana. Born and raised.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that. Yeah.
So the 80s, we talk about it a lot too. 80s and 90s was definitely challenging. The 80s, we were coming off of where the steel mills, there was a lot of steel mills throughout those areas, and also railroads. And that was production from the vehicles and motor vehicles was big in those areas, and it was going down. Unfortunately, from the 70s, they had the Jackson 5s to the 80s, they had the steel mills, and then the 90s, it was definitely going down. Mm-hmm. What happens is when the industry goes down, unfortunately, crime goes up because people are trying to survive, trying to make it for various reasons. So it was definitely some tough, I think you would agree, it was some tough times living in Gary during the times in the 90s.
Anywhere, and definitely Gary, but I
Mhm.
mean in Hessville, my dad worked in the steel mills. He was an
Oh, there you
electrician,
go.
worked at Inland Steel, plus a lot of other areas. But I remember from like mid '80s to when we left in '94 to move to Las Vegas, he was laid off constantly, and a lot of that was for the reason you're saying. So you saw a town really
Yes.
dying in front of your eyes as
Yes.
you're growing up. You know, especially Gary. Gary got hit harder than Hessville did for sure.
Yeah.
But keep going.
Now, I was saying that's a good point. The Midwest is known as the mecca of communication and transportation. So a lot of people weren't doing things with the railroads. They were just exporting, importing, you know, and foreign trade became more popular during that time. So unfortunately, a lot of those golden cities, we call it during that time, went down. So crime went up. So 4 out of the 10 years we were there in the 90s, Gary, unfortunately, was the crime capital of the U.S.
I remember hearing that. And I remember hearing it when I lived there, but I also, we moved to Vegas in '94. And I remember hearing it like, oh, that's like right next to where I used to live. And it's per capita, right? So,
per capita.
But with that, there's a lot that goes on in those types of communities. So what, you growing up and went through public school, I'm guessing those types of things. What did you experience? And what did you see growing up as a young kid?
Saw a lot of violence, but also saw a lot of people just trying to make ends meet, right? You know, I saw and felt struggle and the hustle. That's where a lot of the hustle for me comes from, especially. But I also saw too, making jokes about it, but you know, it was a lot of churches and then there was a lot of liquor stores in Gary, Indiana. So you can drink your depression away or you can go somewhere to have faith and have hope. So, you know, you can choose usually one path or the other. We also saw some athletes come out of Gary, Indiana, too. Glenn Robinson, you know, was famous for coming out. We had some actors, Mr. Williams, who did a lot of movies in the 50s and 60s. And then we came off the air for the Jackson 5. So we saw people who made it out of Gary and actually had successful careers. So a big thing of hope and faith and also the things that we were seeing that was going on in the neighborhood.
Yeah, you know, that's a perspective to me at like it's a Kairos moment. Like you got an area to be able to pick from, but when you're a young kid, that's not always. It's easy to go that wrong way, right? If your friends are going in that direction, and the gang life, the liquor life, whatever that would be. How did you get led to faith? What took you there?
So my family always was very religious. I call myself a spiritual person, but I was very religious at the time. I was going to, we call it Bible studies and regular meetings, probably 4 or 5 times a week. So we were always constantly. So that steered me towards a lot of the influences that was around me as well and helped me build a good foundation. And then having friends, unfortunately, some friends led other paths that didn't lead to education, didn't lead to, you know, working and jobs and things like that. And then, you know, a big point is having the opportunities. A lot of people didn't see outside the circle. They didn't think or know of, hey, this is out there for you if you just, you know, lead a certain path. So unfortunately, that happens a lot. People give up because they don't see the path. They don't see opportunities. They don't see anything outside of that.
Yeah, they lack hope, but that's because life is really hard.
Yes.
And hope could be there, but if you get beat down over and over again, hope gets a lot harder, right? Especially if you don't have those positive role models in your life. For you, who are some role models in your life?
That's a great question. My father was always a part of my life. Unfortunately, he left when I was about 6 years old. So it was my mom. And my mom is, oh man, was a very, very strong influence. And as you grow up and you mature, you don't understand the influence. My mom was always a very mellow person. And I say mellow because she wasn't a fusser. She was, you know, very kind-hearted, very sweet. And as I'm growing up, I'm thinking that's a weakness, but it's not a weakness. It's a strength. You know, the way she held it down and the way she raised a young man as I was coming up, and I gave her, you know, hell to pay. I was a teenager. You know, we all had our moments and things like that. And, you know, I apologize. My mom does watch some of these, so I apologize, Mom, for giving you that.
Make that a clip just for her.
I know. I got to give her a coffee mug. But my grandfather was definitely a strong influence on me as well. And my grandfather taught me, you know, definitely about morals. He taught me about, you know, bigger strengths. He taught to me a lot about what to do for family and to work hard. He had 2 jobs, raising 7 kids. So I learned a lot from my grandfather. I spent a lot of time with my grandparents, and that's a lot of the giving back, because I was around people that were older that taught me those stories. And we talk about real stories. Those come from, our grandparents and things like that, that taught us those stories. And this is what it was like when I was, growing up, or this is what I had to experience. So that's where a lot of it became instilled in me.
Did your grandpa grow up like in the 50s, 60s? Did he come through that movement when it wasn't always okay? It wasn't always okay to be black in America, right? Let's be real.
Even before in the 20s and 30s. So even, harder.
Oh,
so
wow.
you think about, in the 1800s, where, the movement came about, that, freedom, as they call it, came about. But, it's been hard in a lot of different places. But, definitely, moving and migrating to areas that, is predominantly black. So I grew up around black, had a few Hispanic, people. And then I had maybe 2 white friends in high school. So think about a community that's primarily just one.
Were you still in Gary here?
In Gary, in Gary.
Yeah.
So predominantly, black and Hispanic. So, I didn't actually formulate or have friends outside of that until I went to college in Chicago, which was a mecca of diversity as well. And that's where I learned a lot just from that experience as well.
Yeah, beautiful. How so we talk about just to go to a story here. I was beginning of COVID, and this is gonna be real talk here. It's in the beginning of COVID, and I was meeting people that I met doing some local videos in the community, and their views were different than mine. We were having drinks, and something came on the TV, and they started talking about well, those communities are bad because their fathers don't stick around. And you talk about like, well, you made it through. You were really fortunate to make it through. But what would you say to people that are like, the dads aren't home, they're not taken care of? But when you look at like a Gary, Indiana, when you look at many other cities that are across the country, as a black man who has a grandfather who's gone through a lot, that you've heard stories a lot, that you have your own stories, what's your like, what should people know about that thing? Yeah.
So you mentioned a couple of different things. So I go back to definitely having a male role model or figure is very important. Whether it's your own personal father or as a father that comes into your life, or a father figure. At the Boys and Girls Club, we talk about having a supportive person in that person's life. And we see tremendous efforts and tremendous results from that happening. So I definitely am a big advocate of that, and trying to give back towards kids as well. So that's definitely important. You have choices you make in life, right? Even if you don't have that person there, you still have a choice in a lot of different aspects. Whether you can still make it through without having that figure, or finding someone as well. I was pushed early on to, even though I might not have had what I needed in my inner home, reach out to different people around my mother's friends or their friends or older people. So I spend a lot of time around older friends. And when I say older, this is a teenager and I'm around 60-year-olds and things like that, and above, and learning from them and learning from their experiences. And one thing at that time, they were able to share some things that they went through. So that helped me to avoid some of the paths and stay straight as I could. And then also to come up from a time that when I got in trouble, it's not now, but when I got in trouble, if my grandmother was called, she whooped me at the school. My grandfather would whoop me at the school. I get home and I get whooped by other people as well. Or when your neighbors seen that you were doing something, they would get on you and then they would call. And it was that community. You talk about community a lot. It was that close-knit community. I think that's what changed more than anything. The fathers being in the home that can have an impact, but neighbors stop caring, the community stop caring as much.
That's it, man. And I would see it differently than you in that case, but that's it. Like if us as neighbors, we understand that there's definitely choices. People make choices, and maybe that's not all around, but as neighbors, shouldn't we go uplift the next generation? We just found out, I think most of us did over the last, 10 years, that with this thing being making us super transparent, that we need a lot of help in our world to make a better tomorrow. But as people that have got through it or that have fought through it, that have learned what if we go in and we support and be the men in the community, help be men in the community to be that support, and I feel like you do that so much with, like the Boys and Girls Club. Like, you don't know who you touch just by saying one thing, or doing one thing, what type of impact you can make on a kid. And sometimes for kids, in my opinion, it's one choice away from just messing up your whole life. When you're in those types of situations, when there's poverty around you, when you got people pulling you, when you don't have that, your community is the gang. That's tough, right? But if we could go in as neighbors now and support, it's going to take a long time. But what could the world look like? And that gives me something to look forward to, and I hope with people like you and many other people that are like you, and I hope myself is in that category, we can help make a better tomorrow, because male figures are important to have in the community, but so are moms, so are grandmas, so are grandpas, all that too. But what can we do? And if each of us did a little bit, what could that be?
Even your shirt, I'm just looking at your shirt, give support, get support, right? So when you're talking about neighbors, helping out people, if it's in your means, if it's someone, and sometimes you get scared. I talked to a man actually last week, and he said, I got stranded on the highway, and I had to walk to the gas station. My phone had died. We are unfortunately in a world that, you're scared to have somebody or let somebody use your phone, even to just make a phone call to get help, because you're like, oh man, this is my person might steal my identity, do things. So with the communication, with the access to security and fraud and different things like that, you're almost nervous sometimes to stop someone. It would be nothing back when to stop on the side of the road to help somebody with a flat tire or help somebody out. Now you're nervous and scared, like, oh, they might try to get me. They might try to do something. So that mentality changed over time, especially with the crimes and things that's happening. And the love of the greater good.
Yeah, no, it's the beautiful point, man. So let's touch a little bit more on your story, man, and let's kind of look at where we're at now. We grew up we're both born in 80. We just learned about 5 minutes ago that maybe 10 minutes ago now.
I am older than Jason. Oh man,
by like 5 months, but I got more gray hair, and he's definitely got more hair on the head, hence why I got the hat on. But we grew up, there was a lot of things happening. Let's say any generation, there's a lot of things happening. But let's look at like what was happening in the Black community as you're growing up. When we talked and we prepped about this, we were reminded of when parental advisory came out from rap albums. It's when Rodney King, the thing happened, was it 92 or ish?
It was 92. I was looking at my notes. 92.
OJ, those types of things. But let's talk about the Black community and what was happening in the society at that time within the community.
And that was a lot. I mean, imagine being a preteen. We were 11 to 12 during the time. You're seeing a man being, assaulted on TV. So that has an effect on you that you really don't understand when you're looking at something. Whether it's something that, he deserved or not deserved, regardless of that, it's something that you've seen on TV. O.J. Simpson trial and going through that had a big effect on race, at the time as well. And that was at the time, the most televised trial of that time period. Even I think the Bronco highway, that was the first time that was happened on national television.
There's still TV. Memes going on about that long after he's gone,
So it was a lot of things going on that affected, you talked about rap music, definitely the late 80s and getting into hip hop. That was definitely something that affected a lot of people as well, and what you listen to and what you feed your mind with. So, you had a lot of different factors there. So I can definitely see, if you don't feed your mind, not only with the negative, if you have more positivity, that you're able to feed your mind with. I'm thinking about, so we're both drinking water here, right? If you put a little dash of dirt in the water, what's going to happen to the water? Clear water.
Get dirty.
It's going to taint it, right?
Yeah.
So you think about it. So you have to have that much more water or pure or positivity going in to affect what's going on around you. The negativity that you see, or the promotion of negativity, or the isolation or the segregation of this race versus this race, instead of pulling together. So feeding your mind with that positivity is definitely even important. So I can see why, you know, some people were affected or go down the negative trail because it's all around you. Sometimes it's probably they feel there's no way to go.
Yeah,
but you know,
when you're seeing it in the street
Mhm.
and you look at Gary, Indiana, you saw some of it in Hammond and Hessville
Mhm.
area, but it wasn't nowhere near what you saw in Gary.
Right.
So you see that as that that's in your world. You look on the news,
Mhm.
that's happening,
Right.
and you're seeing that,
Right.
you know, and shoot, we're
Right.
30 years later, man, we're still seeing that stuff,
Exactly.
which we'll touch base on in a minute.
Yeah.
But let's look at the Rodney King
Right.
situation. You
Mhm.
were 11, 12 years
Yep.
old when that happened.
Mhm.
And that was, it was all over the news. It was the show Cops was on
Mhm.
there then. Let's talk about like that piece of it.
Mhm.
Like this man, I don't remember all the specific details, but he was beat
Mhm.
really badly.
Yes. Mhm.
And it was caught on camera.
Mhm. Yeah.
Which now we could say we've seen more of. Where does that come from? What is
Mhm.
that in from your perspective?
Mhm.
Where does that come from, and what do people need to learn in society that
Mhm.
are maybe different
Mhm.
than you?
What I look at when I look at situations like that is that, you know, those people, you know, made way bad choices, right? And it sucks, you know. Do I believe that all people are like that? No. You know, just from my heart, you know, I think that most people have some good in them.
Yeah.
And it's something that you have to pull
I
out.
think we're all
But that,
born with a good
yeah,
heart. The world the
taints
world
it sometimes, right?
beats us down sometimes, and
Right.
depending on our community, depending on
Yeah.
a lot of things, maybe we don't get out of
You-
it. Yeah.
But you know, stupid choices, and I do feel if you make the wrong choices, there are consequences that you have to face to that. So you know, the justice system as it was made supposedly to put away people, unfortunately at times fails people, and that's where a lot of injustice come from. When the just law is not made for everyone, that's injustice. You know, the definition by what is stated. And that ties into, you talked about cops, you talked about what we saw on TV, but also too going back to our time, what happens when you have per capita the murder capital of the U.S. You have state troopers that come in. So the presence of police, did you? Yeah,
I
you
didn't know
probably,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So the state troopers came in, and a lot of time, what happened is they were infiltrating drugs and things that come in. So we were seeing more armed policemen and armed troopers in our areas and neighborhoods. So our perception, when you're looking at that and seeing what you see on TV, was not the best, right? You know, certain things, and I remember, unfortunately, you know, as a black man, having as a child, and we talked about this 3 weeks ago at Celeste. You know, shout out to Celeste for moving the diversity initiative as well. Certain things
sure.
that I had to be trained as a child that maybe some of my friends now didn't have to go through. You know, if a policeman stops you, what to do and what not to do. You know, how to position yourself. What not. You know, don't raise your voice. You know, don't reach for anything. Don't reach for, you know, your beeper. We didn't have cell phones at the time. Don't reach for your beeper. Don't reach for this. Don't reach for that, because you didn't want the perception of you trying to be violent or you refusing to be stopped as well. So it's a lot of things going on, especially as a young person living during that time that affected it, the journey.
There's one thing that stuck with me from our prep conversation. That like I was taught how to at a very young age how to deal with police, like what to do. You talked about like when you drove and like 10 and 2, like,
yeah, exactly.
when you were there, and
right.
I couldn't even. I never got that talk.
Yeah.
I've been stopped over by the cops. I've been in trouble when I was younger.
Right.
All those things. I never got that talk. But if you're go into like police are in the community, and it's murder capital of the world. You're seeing this on the news. Like this is what's in our society, in your opinion, that's keeping us not to be able to fix this or to heal this piece.
And I had to preference too, because I am a person that reads the paper and I watch news as well. But you got to be careful what you watch as well, you know, because it can get negative. You know, you get negative influence. It's all negative, 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 negative. Oh, the weather might be nice today. Then negative, negative, negative. So you got to be careful what you feed your mind, because they're there to make money, and it's a shock value too that they're trying to do, right? And bring negativity. Unfortunately, sells more when you go through TV, when you go through news. So you got to be careful what you feed your mind with. You got to be careful what you watch, and how much you watch of it. Because again, it can take your perspective on things and then head you in the wrong direction too.
Yeah, like we look at it, what's in our society now, like propaganda has always been there. Propaganda and misinformation, disinformation, whatever you call it, is like on crack now, and it's from all sides of the table. But for me, it kind of comes back to like, well, that's why small communities of people are super important. That's why knowing your neighbor is super important. That's why local is super important, because we could talk and we could get different perspectives from people. And they're our neighbors, and we know them, and we can understand that it's not just a media outlet pushing some narrative, that there is some truth in that, and that as a society we should look to be able to, like, how can we learn and grow from that, not be defensive, not let the Alan Stern says it a lot, like the clickbait, that type of stuff. Don't let that influence your emotions. To me, it's learn if you don't understand something, and then that community of people, I think, are huge, to be able to learn and grow from.
So the other thing too, if you don't mind me jumping in, just when you get to know people too, what happens is that human aspect to it too. And that's what COVID, unfortunately, took away a lot of it, is the human aspect of it. The one-on-one, sitting down and talk. We first sat and talked at Portillo's. I don't know if you remember, when we first were getting to know each other. And that was just a conversation. It wasn't scripted. It wasn't anything. We got to know each other, chop it up, and things like that. When you do that, you also allow yourself some allowance, like, if something was to happen, like, okay, now it's the person that I'm talking to, not Jason Stallard, Love Local Media, not Jason Stallard, wherever, right? It's that person that you're focused on. So when you allow yourself to get to know the person, that's where compassion come in. And again, the human aspect of it. So that way you can relate to someone one-on-one. You have more, more emotions, more feelings, and things like that. And I got to know you personally, and that, I think it created, a friendship that we have now.
Yeah, I definitely think that it's a big piece of it, but it's about understanding people's story. It's about understanding who they are authentically, And there's so many times in our world where we pretty up a front if we let it, but the realness, we decided to name this Real Stories, actually from your idea. I'm like, oh, that's amazing. But real stories show compassion. If he went through that, well, I know his heart. I felt his heart. I was right there next to him. He is a good man. And he went through that. He saw that, and he did that. Like, your perspectives change, right? But you have to learn and lean into, like, wanting to understand somebody else's story other than your own, and know that we all got a story. And I bet me personally, and why even we named Love Local Media, is like, I think we all got a story, and I don't think our stories are that far different. There's a lot of specific things that are different and unique or different, but at the core of them, it comes from, like, we all need empathy, we all need compassion, we all need to work on humility, we all need to have this open availability to be humble, and to not always be right, and to be okay with that, to learn from that, so that I go back to, like, so we could create a better tomorrow. But if we're not talking to people, if we're just letting the news dictate the narratives in our world, I feel like we're really missing out on what our communities could look like if we just talked with each other and respected one another's story, even if it is different than ours.
That's true. That's very true. Be open to. It's okay if someone has a different story. It's okay if you friends with someone that doesn't look like you. It's okay if they didn't come up the same way you did. But that allows, when you talk about diversity, inclusion, and equity, is opportunities for you to grow too, because you're also sharing stories from other people's opinions. You're also understanding that other person, right? That allows, like, the experience when I went to Robert Morris, when I went to college in Chicago. I never met, and it's just where I came from. I never met a Asian person before, anyone from China, Korea. I never met someone outside of that. I didn't have a lot of white people in my circle at the time as well. So that allowed me to see not only other foods, but other opinions, other thoughts. And when you are able to absorb that and take that in, then your experiences and your eyes and your vision widens out as well. You don't have the blinders on that you only see in one perspective. It allows you to open up to see other people's opinions and things like that too.
And there's so many perspectives that are out there, and each of our perspectives are different and unique. But we talk about DEI, and I know there's some people that are out there like, oh, I think that is divisive. And I question, like, well, how is it divisive? And I have friends that think differently than me, and I ask these questions, and I'm still struggling with the answers that I'm getting back, because I personally don't think it is divisive. I think it's understanding one another's story, and that each of our perspectives are different, and that the world isn't perfect. And within DEI field, like there's a lot of things that still need to be worked on in order to create a better tomorrow. So we should be talking about that. It's not divisive. It's to show that, like, here as Americans, let's look at unifying, because we are from everywhere. And let's not forget that we ran the Indians out, and that's how we got here. So I think there's something for us to be able to learn from. And my hope is that we could, the media makes it really bad, man. Let's be real. They think they're saying it's divisive all the time, but it's not divisive. So, like, you as a black man, when you hear that, like, what do you think when you talk about, when somebody says it's divisive, like, what are your views?
And it could be. So,
sure it could be. Yeah.
Definitely. One thing, with myself, Chet, and Vandana, who are phenomenal co-chairs of the Diversity Alliance for Schaumburg. So shout out to them. One thing when we don't always get it right. One thing when we were starting this this group, at first it was called the Minority Group, right? And when we thought about the name, when we first, is that the image that we want displayed, the Minority Group? Because when you think about a minority, when you go to, if anybody ever went to school or college, you have a major and a minor. Which one is more important? The major, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what you focus on, and the minor is secondary. So we had even the wrong focus when we were naming the group, and we said, you know what? Let's call it something else. And that's where we came up with the Diversity Alliance, right? Which is much stronger, and we're welcoming ideas. Even in the first few months, we didn't know what it was going to look like. First few months, we said, we're only going to invite people that look like us and exclude everyone else. But even that changed, and I talked about it before. Even with our mentality, let's invite people to the table that have different views, like you just mentioned before, and diverse ideas. So that way we can get this thing right and get it pointed in the right direction, and have fruitful, creative conversations that's focused on everyone being unified and united, like you talked about as well.
Yeah, I think that's so important. Was it you or Chet that I was talking to, and they were saying that it was like, it was one of our white friends, like, oh, I don't have to come. I'm not, like, that's not for me type thing. Like, oh no, I feel like it was you. Like, no, we need you too.
Right.
We need it's all of us. And I love how you talk about it as ideas, because at the end of the day, that's really what it's perspectives and it's ideas. To me, the goal of that is more ideas we have that come from different perspectives. The better idea of that wins out at the end of the day, because we're looking at it from all different angles. Sometimes when we're sitting around tables, and if we're all the same, are we really bringing that much value to the table? But if we're all uniquely different, and through that we come up with the best possible solution, it's usually the better term of what we're doing.
And then part of it too is, just like me, I came from, definitely a narrow scope of the world, right? When we get to the point that, we're not even talking about diversity, or we're not even talking about that's a black man, that's a white man, that's a Korean, whatever, and we're just talking about men and women, or whatever, that's where the goal is to get to, that we're just people.
Yes.
We're humans.
Yeah.
We're team human, on this earth, and we're trying to make a better tomorrow.
Yes.
That's what the goal is.
Yeah. 100% is what the goal is. And it's, us as humans just messed up with the color stuff. It's just, we're all from different places. We all were made differently, but in our hearts, it's good hearts or bad hearts, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
hearts that need growing and
Yeah.
hearts that need healing and
Yeah.
many other things in between.
Sure.
But
Sure.
when we were talking, and you mentioned it earlier too, you talked about building a community. And when I think of Brandon Cork, I think of community but I think of community and connection.
Right.
You naturally, you have this natural gift to be like, oh, I just met you. You're do this. You know, you're a good connection for boom. That is like so natural to you. I feel like you and Ragu, you know, Alan's probably in that too, in our circles. Alan Stern, that's a gift in its own right. But we talk about creating a better tomorrow, and we talk about our business community. What should we be focused on as a business community to be able to create a better tomorrow in the craziness of our current world? In your opinion, that's a big question.
Yeah, it is. That's definitely a huge question. I'm gonna chop it off. They said, how do you eat an elephant? You break it off in little bites.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna break it off. So a part of it is, allowing yourself to see different perspectives. That was something that we talked about. Allow creativity, allow different ideas. I know you talked about Ragu, you talked about Alan as well. It's getting to know people on a personal level too. Even if it's on a personal level, get to know them, sit with them one-on-one, get to know what they about, what motivates them, what's their why, who's a good connection for them. You can't connect someone if you don't know who's a good connector for them. So that's part of it as well. One thing we talked about too is you can't be who you want to be until you're the best version of yourself. So we talked about true manifestation, right? When I was able to be the authentic Brandon, then I'm able to help others as well. So you definitely got to take care of home first. You got to make sure you're aware of who you are and what you want to do and what you want to accomplish, especially when you're talking about business, in order to help others as well.
Yeah. It's a huge piece, knowing yourself and getting through that. And I haven't always known myself. I think I always said I knew myself.
We always growing.
I think I was wrong, and we talked a little bit in this conversation beforehand about corporate America. We both have backgrounds in corporate America.
Yeah.
So to me, when I was in corporate America, I wasn't being my true self. I didn't belong in somebody else's box. I needed a creative outlet. God was steering me in that direction. But when we talk, so knowing, and I say that for no other reason to know that it is a journey. We're always growing, we're always evolving, but to seek that. What do you think has been one of your key drivers to being able to seek to get to who your true self is?
That's a great question. I think back, I'll give an example first, or a vision that I always stick in my head. It was a man that had two pictures of himself. He had the 6-month picture and then who he was now. I even take it way back. How about little Brandon Alonzo Cork and little Jason, and then who we are right now? Will we like what we see now? Or will we say, hey, buddy, you got some work to do? So looking at those images as well and thinking, and that's that journey that we're always going to be on. It's not hopefully it's not a finish line, right? We go past that, right? We're always continuing to grow. And I commend you for, we talk about it a lot of times, continuing to grow, continuing to improve. I made a lot of mistakes in my life.
Yeah. Me too.
What do you do from it, right?
Yeah.
Do you get back in your shell and like, well, that sucked. I guess life's over. Or, I'm saying that jokingly or sarcastically, or we're going to say, you know what? I screwed up, but the next time I'm going to be better. Or going back to those people and say, you know what? I probably didn't say the right thing to you, or forgive me. I wasn't myself that day, kind of make it better. Because a lot of us now, we're so prideful into growth. We're so prideful into saying, I'm sorry. And that's something I definitely struggle at and still learning at as well. Because we're not perfect. You mentioned it earlier. We all have flaws.
You'll get bad days from us, It was a friend of ours, I remember. It was end of December and I was having a bad day. He got the worst of me when he called and gave me some news. And I remember sitting there at night and I remember like, fuck. Like I shouldn't have came off like that. And I just saw how it was wrong in every different area. So I called him the next day. I'm like, I'm just really struggling right now. And he welcomed me in with open arms. Like, oh, I'm sorry to hear that, man. It didn't seem like you, but I was also like, I was going to check back in to make sure you're all right. But thanks for the call. I think there's a lot of power in like, hey, I'm not perfect.
Exactly.
And in order for us to grow as a society, we're all going to have to
Right.
learn to grow to be able to make
Right.
a better tomorrow. You talk about, like, to me, it's Ritesh and I will talk about it too, like the inner child piece of it.
Yes.
And there was a book that was this is 2020ish. I was coming out of a lot of growing at that time,
Okay.
and but I was struggling. And there was this book called Scary Close. It's written by Donald Miller, which is the same guy that writes all the marketing books, but he is a faith guy too. And this one was very much a faith about getting to know yourself.
Okay.
And he talked about, if you don't know your inner child, if you don't remember that kid at 5 years old, like, drop what you're doing and go find him right now, or go find her right now. Yeah. And I remember reading that and like, oh, that's interesting. And I remember being on walks and thinking about that more, and realizing how far off I got from that little child. Right. And because of society norms, because of jobs I was doing, of whatever that thing was for me, I wasn't satisfying that inner child, which is, to me, I look back now, it was very much a true essence of me, was when I was 5-6 years old. And I think after that, you slowly get beat down by the world to maybe some of the things that were mentioned in earlier. But so if somebody's struggling with their inner child stuff, like, when did, I guess the two questions, did you always know that? Was that brought up within you, or and what is your story to get there? And then when you found it, what advice would you give to somebody to overcome and get through it so that they could be their best selves?
That's awesome. Thank you for asking that question. So I actually wrote down something too. I want to make sure I get it right too. So the true manifestation comes from your inner happiness and being the truest version of yourself. So as you're growing up, I even think about it, at 5 or 6, when our parents asked, what do you want to become, or what do you want to do? We probably said something outrageous, right? Most of us do, right? I was even listening, to Caleb Williams. He said at 12 years old, he knew he wanted to be the first round draft pick and the first pick for the Bears. And I'm like, at 12 years old, I definitely didn't know that, right? Yeah. So kudos to him. That just wasn't me. I still was trying to find myself, to your point. I still was trying to find out who I was. And a lot of times, we end up doing what other people want us to do, or become what other people want us to become.
So sometimes it's our family, sometimes it's our friends, sometimes it's our work, sometimes it's all of them.
Exactly. Right? Yeah. Exactly. And really, until early adulthood, that's when I say, you know what? It's time to start doing for Brandon. It's time to start doing for me. And then again, once you start doing those things, it seems like that light starts, and life actually starts, because you're doing for yourself. And then in turn, when you're doing for yourself, you're actually doing for others. Yes. Because now you're able to, you're the version of yourself, and you feel complete, and you feel yourself. Now you're able to fill other people's cups as well.
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful way to look at it. It's when you get to your true self, when you're doing what you're doing, like, everything is more natural. In my opinion, it's more natural. Even when things suck, I'm still experiencing joy. Right. Where when things sucked, when I was in corporate America, joy I could not find. Right. But if I sit here today and I look at struggles that I've been through, I'm content with it now, because I know that this is a part of my journey. But then I go into it even more, and I'm like, well, why did I suck? Well, was I not, or why would I struggle? Was I listening to that inner child? Was I listening to that kid that that my true essence, my true self, and my look in, and sometimes you're not doing those things. So it goes back to what we said earlier, like, we're always learning, we're always growing, and when we're not, that's when we should be scared as humans. Like, we're an evolution, not only as a species, but from beginning to end, we evolve as humans, and I think that's really important for us to keep in mind.
I'm gonna add something to that as well, because I think back, the expectations that sometimes other people put on ourselves, sometimes from your parents, sometimes from other people around you. The one thing I learned to say is, well, did I do that, or was I what I was supposed to be? And if I don't, it's okay. Saying it's okay.
Yeah.
It's another day. Yeah. You have to do that, because that's when when you're comfortable with yourself. Like, you know what? I wasn't able to do that. It's okay. I'm a firm believer. You are the hardest, person on yourself, and sometimes the biggest advocate. So you got to allow yourself both of those things as well. Allow yourself to be okay with if you do fail, be okay. It's all right.
Yeah.
What can I do? You mentioned it before. This is not working for me. What's that next avenue look like? If I had a failing business like I've had before too, it's okay. Now let me brush myself off.
I've been pretty transparent with 23 was a tough year for business, I think, for many of us. But as a startup company, there was just so much that I learned throughout that year. But my ability to pivot was slow because I wouldn't, my ego was in my way of me being able to overcome. And I didn't want to be wrong about this certain thing and the way I did it. But when I was like, oh, fuck, I was wrong, and that's okay. Like the freedom of it, and now we're sitting here and we're in a good spot, and we grew from it, we learned from it. But we had to, even when you're going after it, it's not just ideal. You're learning as you go through this. That's where I'm trying to go. Like, and it's going to be hard. Yeah. And certain things will be harder than others, but you can get through it. You just got to keep going. Right. At the end of the day. Yeah. When we talk about our business community and we talk about, happiness, about creating a better tomorrow, I think about our community that we have, that and our friends that we have here in the Northwest suburbs, businesses, nonprofits. And I feel like there's a movement happening. And that movement is there's this large group of people that just want to help each other win. It's a beautiful thing.
It's beautiful.
So what do you like? And you're a part of that movement. I feel like you're like one of the leaders in that movement. What do you think we have to do? We don't need to go on anything granular, but we know our world is a hot mess right now. We know as a country, the amount of propaganda and misinformation that is here is at scale, and it's divisive as all could be. What's your advice to us as community members and business leaders? Like, how can we, what should we work on to be able to create a better tomorrow? Yeah. And with the elephant probably type bites.
No problem. I do want to go back because to something you just said too. Leader in the community, I definitely, to me, and this is just my opinion, the leaders are the ones that's actually doing it. Because even the organizations, the Pam Orrs, the Katinas, the Gabbies, those are the people that are in it every day. I'm in it as an advocate for those people. So I'm definitely a biggest advocate and supporter, but those people are the ones in and out every day, the Boys and Girls Club that's seeing those kids and things like that. Yeah. So they're the
boots on the ground, right?
They're the leaders, in my opinion, that's doing it. So I'm definitely the biggest advocate, though, and biggest cheerleader for those people. But for us,
connector for those people, whether you see it, but you are that.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. For us, and I talked to Greg about this as well, and talking to her yesterday, is finding something that you are passionate about and something that you connect. It's so hard because there's a lot of great organizations that you mentioned it before. It's a lot of great people doing amazing things. So finding something that you connect with, that connects to your community, and inspiring others as well to want to reach out. My hope is that maybe someone listening and say, you know what, let me find something that I'm passionate about. Let me find somebody that I want to connect and go that.
It takes all of us, right? And each of us has a different skill set, a different thing, but it truly takes a village.
Yes.
So if we're looking at like, okay, our world is a hot mess, our communities are a little bit of a hot mess. How can we make them better? Yes. It starts with each of us doing one small action.
Right.
And that compound effect, that's what creates the better tomorrow, right? But it takes all of us.
Yeah. I heard something too, that one small action causes a reaction, right?
That's a good one. Yeah.
So, that's that movement that you're talking about, right? If you're moving for or against, right?
So what's that quote again?
One small action causes a reaction. So sometimes, when you think about it, and again, that's when we try to put too much on ourselves, moving a molehill or moving a hill, right? It could be something small. An introduction costs me nothing. Right. Connecting somebody with somebody, it costs me nothing. But what do I get back? Maybe I connected two people that, end up being power partners. Maybe I connected someone that ends up being a donor or a sponsor. So those are the things that you look back, because if you're starting something just to get something back, you're not in it for the right reasons anyway.
Yeah, and just to give,
Mm-hmm.
there brings some pure joy,
Yeah.
especially if you're doing it within like your wheelhouse, but to do something because you're going to get business from it, like that's a taker mentality. Then I feel like that taker mentality is, at least in the communities that we're fortunate enough to be in, that taker mentality is slowly dissipating because people realize the power that we have as givers and as servant leaders supporting it. And you are a leader in the community. You're a leader that supports other leaders. A leader doesn't mean there's tons of leaders that are out there.
Yes, I agree with that.
Each of us has our own thing, right?
I agree.
What else would you like our audience to know? What else like about Brandon Cork that you're like, I think people need to know?
That's a good one. I'm trying to think of something as well. A lot of it is about, even though we're from, Indiana, we're from, maybe a poor part of Indiana, your background doesn't make your future, right? It's different steps, to take. It's a lot of my path has been sharpened by the information that I have, by positive role models that I've looked to in my life, by building blocks. So no one usually gets somewhere by themselves too. So again, that's where it comes to, if you're in a position that you're able to, having mentorship mentality, having a servantship mentality as well, and offering that to others. I firmly believe on the community aspect, as it goes through as well, because we build stronger communities, we build stronger networks, able to help, formulate relationships that's sustainable as well. So that's the biggest takeaway that I actually have too for what you have.
I love that, man. It's I think the greatest gift my parents ever gave me was growing up the way that I did. For me, it was a different story, and there's a lot of other things that are in there. But I look at my journey and growing from like being this poor kid in Indiana to now my parents moving to Las Vegas to now you're not amongst a bunch of poor kids. They put me in like, it would be a Conan or a friend. So I'm a poor kid in that. To see the things that you learn from seeing both sides of the perspectives is the greatest gift I think I've ever had. So it sounds like you have some of that in you as well. If somebody wants to connect with you, whether it's for Pulse Technology or either they want to be more of a friend with Brandon, where can they reach out to?
LinkedIn is bigger on LinkedIn than I am on usually social media. So LinkedIn, Brandon Cork. You'll see my face and my picture up there. Definitely I connect with everyone. So that's the best spot to meet me at.
Cool. Beautiful, man. Well, I've enjoyed our conversation today. I feel like we could do a lot more of these and continue with the real stories method. But I appreciate you. Appreciate your heart. I appreciate you taking time to be able to share your story here on the Love Local Chicagoland podcast.
I appreciate you sharing these real stories, especially with the community. I know the stories that I listen to from other people that's been on the show and the work that you're doing with not-for-profits. Please continue to do that and push that and below 4. So we appreciate hearing that as well.
Appreciate that, man. We ain't stopping. We're just aligning our place in the world, but we appreciate that. So my friends, real stories with Brandon Cork, first of hopefully many that we'll do around this real stories piece. My friends, there's a lot going on in our world today, so that if we could learn and grow from other people's stories, my hope is that we could learn something within ourselves to be able to take that as an action to be able to create a better tomorrow. So thanks for listening. Follow, subscribe. We are just getting started here on Love Local Chicagoland. Peace out.
Thank you.